Welcome to the video on installing Velociraptor. We're going to install Velociraptor on an Ubuntu machine inside the AllSafe LAN. Okay, before we can install Velociraptor, we want to make sure that you have Ubuntu created and available. Right now, so far, I haven't touched on Ubuntu. The link for the download was in the second lesson. However, if you haven't uploaded it yet, then we can go ahead and do that now. So just highlight PVE, the Proxmox virtual environment, then go to create VM. For the name of this, we're just going to call it Velociraptor. Even though it is an Ubuntu VM, we're only going to run Velociraptor on it. So we give it a name and we select the OS, the storage is local, and then select the drop down for ISO image. Then look for the Ubuntu desktop. So we're going to use the desktop for it for several reasons, but I'll get into later. But just select that ISO, go to System. Now what we want with the graphics card is we want Spice. And for machine, do the drop down to Q35. And let's check the box for QEMU agent. We'll keep everything else the same. However, after we get this finished, before we start it, we want to go to the display option and give the graphic card Spice. We want to give it 128 megabytes of memory. So now we go to disks. I'm going to up this to 100. If you have the space, go ahead and give it 100 gigabytes because you may be storing stuff, things that you collect from the victim, artifacts and stuff will be stored on that VM. So you just want to make sure that you give yourself enough room. Then go to CPU. I'm going to give it 2 core. And for memory, let's bump this up to 4 gigabytes, which is 4,096 megabytes because there's 1,024 megabytes in a gigabyte. Once we've done that, we'll go to network. Now for network, we want to put this in that AllSafe LAN. So the bridge is VMBR1 and the VLAN tag is 20. We'll keep this the same. We want to deselect the firewall. Now this gives us a chance to confirm. We do want to get in, like I mentioned before, on the display to up the memory on that. So we'll select finish. All right, so once that shows up on the left-hand side under PVE, let's go to display, double click that, and let's put 128 megabytes. Now at this point, we're ready to go ahead and start it. And when we start it, we will be installing Ubuntu. So once it's started, we can, in the console, drop down and we can go straight to Spice. And we want to install Ubuntu. Now this installation could take a few minutes, so be patient, but there's nothing crazy different about the way that Ubuntu gets installed. Okay, the installation is pretty straightforward. Select your language. We're just going to select next on this. I'm using a US keyboard, a wired connection, and it's saying now that there's an update available for the installer. I just downloaded the latest available version, but we'll go ahead and skip this for now and I'll update later. and we want to install Ubuntu. We want to do it with the interactive installation. And as far as apps go, let's just go with the default selection. We're not going to be using a lot of apps. In fact, I'm not going to install any of these third-party services. And now we can go ahead and install it. It's just going to erase that disk that we assigned it. So we'll create a user's name. I'm going with Elliot. And the reason I'm using Elliot for this is because this is in his role as an AllSafe analyst. And then for the computer's name, I will change this to Velociraptor. I believe this may have to be all lowercase, so I'd change that to Velociraptor. Elliot is username, and then we give it password. And we'll select next. Then pick your time zone. I'm currently in Vienna, Austria, so I'll go with that. And then we go ahead and select install. Now this may take a few minutes, so I'm going to pause the video during the installation. If there's any part that requires user interaction, then I'll restart the video. Okay, so now it's finished installing. We need to restart, and it did take a while to install, so just be patient. So I'll go ahead and select the restart button. Okay, so what we're getting now, it's prompting us. It says to remove the storage medium or the installation medium. That is that CD that we created from the ISO. So if we go to our Proxmox, we can see under CD, that's the installation media. We just need to remove that. So what's happening is basically that CD is virtual, but it's just like a physical CD. If you install an operating system, you put it in the computer and it boots from that device. And then after it's installed, you want to take that device out, or you could create like an infinite loop, because after an installation, the computer restarts and it boots from that device again and then starts to install again. Now, luckily, Ubuntu prevents that loop from happening, but we still need to remove it. Now, if we go back to Velociraptor, we can just hit enter, and it should start normally from this point. Okay, so now it's restarted. We can get logged in. Okay, once we get logged in, what we want to do is find out our IP address. We just first close through this the first time. Okay, so we want to check our IP address, and this will do two things for us. First, it will let us know that we're connected to the right network. So we'll just type in IPA. We see it's 10.0.2.18. Remember, in the AllSafe LAN, we are in that 10.0.2 IP range. So the fact that we got 1.8 is fine. It means DHCP is working. Now, since this is a server, we need to set a static IP address. So I'm going to go back to my Windows machine where I am logged into pfSense. And from there, what I'm going to do is select status and then come down to DHCP leases. And we see our Velociraptor and the IP address of 10.0.2.18. Now remember, how we can make this a static IP address is just to select the plus sign. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to type in the IP I'm going to type 10.0.2.3 because remember I've already given 10.0.2.2 to Kali Purple that we installed Waza on, so we don't want that conflict. And then we scroll down to the bottom, select Save, and then we want to apply the changes. Now we'll go back to our Ubuntu. Now remember, if I just type IPA, you see we still have that IP address. So what we need to do is either restart the virtual machine or take the adapter down and bring it back up like we did with Kali Purple. Now, unlike Kali, if we run ifconfig, it's not installed by default anymore. So we have to actually install net-tools to be able to use ifconfig. So we can go ahead and do that. So we'll go sudo apt. First, I'm going to select update. And that's just to make sure that we have all the latest applications and services and latest versions in our repository. So once we've done that, we'll go ahead and run sudo apt install, and we'll scroll back up. See, it's net-tools if you forget exactly the syntax. Okay, then we can test it just by running ifconfig. We see it's working and it gives us the IP address for this adapter ENP6S18. So we are just going to take the adapter down and bring it back up. First, we'll take it down. All right, so the proper nomenclature is sudo ifconfig, then the name of the adapter, and then down. And now I want to basically run the same thing, but I want to bring it up. Now if I just run ifconfig, all we did was take the adapter down and then bring it back up. If I run ifconfig, not typing very well today. Now, if we look at the IP address, we are getting 10.0.2.3. So we were successful at setting that static IP address through the interface on pfSense. So now that we have a static IP address, we can start to install Velociraptor. So I'll clear the screen, and if you go to the walkthrough, you'll see a command that we want to run. I'm just going to copy and paste that in. So what this is doing, wget, of course, reaches out on the internet. It's going to go to the GitHub page for Velociraptor, and it's going to pull down the latest version. Now, if this is in February 2026, this is the latest version of Velociraptor. If you're watching this later, a year from now or 6 months from now, go to the Velociraptor page right there. You could just go to the GitHub Velociraptor and see what the latest release is. And if it's different than 75.6, version 0.75.6, then you'll need to change this command. This command is very specific. It's going to download that file. So if it changes, then don't think it's broke. All you need to do is you could update this yourself by just typing in the latest version number. And if you select enter at this point, you can see it's downloading Velociraptor. So now we have Velociraptor downloaded. It's sitting on our virtual machine. If we can run lsla just to confirm, there's Velociraptor, and it gives the entire file name. So now that we have that, we want to go ahead and change the properties. So we are going to run chmod. And remember that these are the ownership properties for that file. You see how it's white right now? Now, once we run this command, and then we run lsla again, we see it's green. So now we're able to execute that command. So what we want to do next is we want to create a directory for Velociraptor. So to create a directory, we just run the command mkdir, which of course is make directory. And then we're putting it in the OPT directory. We're going to create one called Velociraptor. And this will just keep all our Velociraptor stuff in one place. So we'll go ahead and select enter on that. So the next thing we want, and then just to make it easy, what I'm going to do is move this Velociraptor file over to the directory that we just created. And this will just make it easier to keep track. So what we want to do is sudo move, which is mv, and we want to move it to the directory that we just created, which is opt, and then Velociraptor. And then the name of the file. And we want to make sure we get that name exactly the same because we already have the code and stuff, commands written out with that specific file name in the walkthrough. So if you want to just be able to copy and paste stuff from the walkthrough, you need to make sure this file is named the exact same way. All right, so now if we ran ls, you notice we don't see that file, or we'll run lsla so we're consistent, but you don't see that Velociraptor file anymore. But if we change directory to opt Velociraptor and we ran lsla, now we see that file. So now that we've done that, we want to create our server configuration file. So to do that, we're just going to copy and paste that command. And now we are in the opt Velociraptor file, and we just paste this command. So it's going to run that file with the generate-i means interactive. So it's going to generate the config file. And the way the config file works is we can scroll up and down to choose the answers and then use the tab once, or hit enter, and it will take us to the next thing. So we can, the first question we ask is, do we want to create a distinct deployment type? We are just going to use the self-signed SSL. And we will be deploying this on Linux. Now it's asking, should we be located a partition big enough? Just wants to make sure the partition is big enough. And we do want to use that opt Velociraptor. And then it wants to write logs to this directory. And yes, we do. And we'll just keep the name of that subdirectory that gets created as logs. And as far as our internal PKI certificate, 1 year is probably good. You can set it to whatever you want. I rebuild these labs so often, in 1 year, I won't be using this particular lab. Okay, and the next question is asking us, do we want to use a registry for a client write back? I'm just going to select yes on that. Then clients will connect to the front end using this public domain, this public name. I'm going to change this to an IP address of our server. So that's another reason why we needed to set the static IP address. So it's 10.0.2.3. We can hit enter for DNS type. We're not really going to be reaching this from the internet. We will be reaching it from our eCore network. We'll have that capability because of the way that we set it up. So we're going to basically select none on this one. And it's asking us if we want to try a new experimental WebSocket. We do not, so we'll select no. And now it's asking us for the port number that we want the front end to listen on. So we're just going to keep the default, which is 8,000. So just make sure if you down the road, if you install another service on this Ubuntu VM, that you do not use port 8,000 because port 8,000 is already going to be used. So we select enter. And now it's asking us for the port for the GUI to listen on. And the default is 8889. So what that means is when we use a browser to get to the GUI, we'll type in the IP address, which we know is 10.0.2.3, and at port 8889. So we'll put a colon after the 3 and then go to port 8889. And we'll go ahead and hit enter. It's asking us for a username. I'm sticking with the Mr. Robot theme, and Elliot is the user. And then you give it a password. And then hit enter. So now it's asking us again, what this is, well, actually asking is, do we want to add an additional user? We already have Elliot on there. So if you want to put an additional user, you would type it in now and then be prompted for the password. If you just hit enter, and then hit enter again, then that assumes that you don't want to create another account. So what this is asking us now is, where do we want to write the configuration file to? And we do want to write it to the OPT Velociraptor directory that we just created. So we will go ahead and select enter. Now at this point, what we can do is just run LSLA to make sure that it wrote it. And we do see the server config file. All right, so once we've done this, we need to make some changes to our config file. So to do that, we're going to use Nano, which is a text editor. And then we'll just type in the name of the config file. We're already in this directory, so we can just go and start to type server config file or server config, and it will autocomplete for us and we can make the change. When I hit enter, this is the actual configuration file. So what we'll do is I'll go down, and what we're looking for is the GUI bind IP address. And what we will do is replace that IP address with the actual IP address that we just set up using pfSense with the static IP. So scroll down. Now we see GUI, we see the bind address. So by default, it gave it the loopback address of 127.0.0.1. We will make that change to 10.0.2.3. And then we'll save the file just by, I always just hit Control X and then yes, and then enter to save the name of the file. So now that we've done that, what we want to do is to create a Debian package for the server by using this command line from our walkthrough. What this command is doing is it's going to run that file, and then it's going to look at the config file, and it's going to create a Debian package that we can actually run. So when I hit enter, it may take a couple seconds, and there we're done. So if I run LSLA again, there is our configuration. So this is the file that we just created, that Debian package. Just to be consistent, let's go ahead and change the ownership. And we'll do 764. And we'll hit enter. Now what we want to do is to run it. So we're using that package manager, the Debian package. So it's sudo dpkg, and then we're running the Velociraptor deb file that we just created, the server. And we see it's working. So now that we've done that, what we want to do is to make sure that the Velociraptor server service is running. So we're just doing systemctl status, then Velociraptor server.service. It should be active, and it is active. So we have successfully installed the Velociraptor server. So now what we can do is jump over to our Windows machine, because we're going to access the Velociraptor GUI at this point. So to do that, we'll jump over to our Windows VM. If I get the password correct. So we'll just open a new tab in the browser and type in https 10.0.2.3. Remember, we want port 8889. We hit enter. We'll get this warning because we are using the self-signed certificate. We can select advanced and then continue. And then we'll be prompted for the username and password that we set up for Velociraptor. Our username is Elliot. And then you give it the password that you gave it. And select sign in. And this is the main page that you see when you log into Velociraptor. What we'll do in the next video is we'll go ahead and install a Velociraptor agent or client, where we'll install that client on all of our Windows systems inside that eCore VLAN, so that it calls back to our Velociraptor server. But we'll do that in the next video.